The council hall was filled with cold light. Alien leaders from across the galaxy sat in silence. For the first time in years, the humans were not speaking. They were simply standing there, quiet, calm, and watching. That silence made even the boldest species uneasy. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something else, like the calm before a great storm. No one expected them to leave. Not really. They had threatened it before. Sure, humans were always dramatic, always emotional, but this time was different. They didn't argue. They didn't debate. They didn't shout. They just stood up, looked at the council, and walked out. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. That was the moment it started, the moment the galaxy began to change. Vaughn, a quiet alien from the knowledge caste of the Talari species, sat at the far end of the hall. He was not powerful. He did not speak much, but he watched everything. And what he saw that day made him feel something he hadn't felt in centuries. Fear. The humans had given so much. They brought technology, ideas, trade, medicine, and yes, sometimes trouble. But even in their worst moments, humans made things move forward. They made the galaxy think. Now they were gone. At first, the council pretended everything was normal. Let them go, one said. They'll be back, another added. But days passed, then weeks, then months. There were no ships from Earth, no signals, no data, no trade. Humanity had not just walked away, they had cut themselves off completely. Some called it a political move. Others thought it was just one of Earth's strange games. But small problems began to rise. Nothing big at first. Just delays in shipments, broken communications, minor system failures. But these little cracks began to grow. Vaughn noticed it first. On his own ship, a human-made navigation system stopped working without warning. The backup kicked in, but it was slower, older, and less accurate. He sent a report. No one replied. Then came the news from Karos Prime. The planet's energy core, designed and maintained by Earth, engineers stopped responding. No one knew how to fix it. The last human technician had left with the others. Across the galaxy, more systems began to fail. AI hubs built by humans started to show strange errors. Trade stations became quiet. Some species who once depended on Earth's tech started to panic. Still, the council refused to admit something was wrong. They'll come back, the council speaker said again. They always do. But Vaughn wasn't so sure anymore. He began collecting old human messages, archives, memories, hidden data caches. The humans had left no final warning, no threat, no goodbye. But in the silence, there was a message, one that didn't need words. You never listened. So now, we're done speaking. He found that sentence hidden deep in an old Earth diplomatic message, coded, barely noticeable. It wasn't in any main file, just a leftover from a past mission. But it felt real and heavy. Some species began whispering. What if humanity wasn't coming back? What if they had decided to move on? Not out of fear, not out of weakness, but because they were tired of being ignored, used, underestimated. One by one, leaders who once mocked humans started to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. But they didn't say it out loud. Pride still ruled their voices, even as doubt filled their hearts. Vaughn looked out into the stars from his private observatory. The galaxy had always been loud: wars, deals, arguments, councils, treaties. But now there was an emptiness, not just in space, in everything. He remembered something a human diplomat once said, long ago, after being insulted in front of the full council. We don't need to fight. If we ever leave, you'll feel it. At the time, Vaughn had laughed along with the others. Now, that laugh echoed like a mistake. Ships from Earth had vanished from every system. No human colonies replied. It was as if Earth had turned invisible. But Vaughn knew better. They weren't gone. They were just done. And in that silence, the galaxy was starting to hear the truth. Without humanity, something was missing. Something big. Something important. But by the time they realized it, it might already be too late. The first real sign came quietly. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a disaster. It was something smaller, something strange. On the peaceful world of Narentu, the lights in the sky began to flicker. Not the stars, those were still shining. It was the satellite grid, powered by a human-built relay. The system had worked perfectly for decades, until one night, it simply shut down. No warning, no damage, just silence. At first, engineers tried to reboot it. But when they checked the core code, they found something odd. It was clean, untouched, but it refused to activate, like the system was waiting for something, or someone. Similar problems began to appear elsewhere. Across the stars, devices created with human systems slowly started going dark. Medical bots, navigation tools, energy controllers, all of them began to slow down or fail. The galaxy had relied on Earth's advancements for over a century, but without humanity maintaining them, everything was falling apart. Vaughn was one of the few who truly noticed the pattern. He had spent years studying human behavior, their technology, their strange way of solving problems. While most of the galaxy dismissed these malfunctions as technical bugs, Vaughn saw them as something else, a quiet message. The humans hadn't just left, they had unthreaded themselves from the galaxy, slowly, gently, but completely. On the trade planet, Velis, a popular hub, once buzzing with goods and ideas, the human trade ports were now empty, their stalls closed, their channels dead. A small alien trader tried to use a human translation tool to complete a deal. The screen blinked once, then a line of text appeared. This service is no longer available. The trader stared at it. In confusion, it wasn't a system error. It was a choice. Other species started to worry, quietly at first. They didn't want to admit that their most reliable ally had left a hole no one else could fill. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Messages were sent into the void, hoping anyone on Earth would reply. No answer came. Vaughn was invited to a secret gathering of thinkers and observers from across the Union. Scientists, diplomats, and historians all sat in a quiet room. The question was simple. Why did humanity leave? And was it possible to bring them back? No one had an answer. Only guesses. Some believed humans had found something better in another galaxy. Perhaps others thought Earth had grown tired of being ignored, used, and dismissed. But one thing was certain: their absence was being felt in ways no one expected. Shipyards slowed down because human alloys couldn't be reproduced. Star maps became outdated because Earth had handled most of the updates. Education systems struggled because human-designed learning cores were fading. Even art and music felt hollow without the influence of Earth's culture. The galaxy, for all its pride, had become deeply dependent on the very species it never fully accepted. And now, that species had simply stepped away. Vaughn decided to dig deeper. He visited old human stations, now empty and silent. One had a garden, still alive thanks to autosystems. In the middle stood a tree native to Earth, still growing strong. Underneath, carved into stone, were simple words: "We gave what we could." He chose not to see. Vaughn stood there for a long time. Back at the council, discussions grew tense. Some leaders suggested rebuilding everything without human systems. Others demanded to send fleets to Earth and demand answers. But they had a problem. No one could find Earth anymore. All paths were gone. The records wiped. The coordinates erased. It was as if the humans had vanished behind a curtain. In the shadows of growing confusion, smaller species began to whisper. Some started asking if humanity had planned all this. Was it a quiet exit? Or something else? Vaughn didn't believe in conspiracy, but he did believe in intent. And this felt like intent. Not revenge, not cruelty, just a choice to no longer be part of something that refused to value them. Now the systems were failing, the tech was fading, and slowly, even the confidence of the mighty races began to dim. The galaxy had let humanity go, but now, it was starting to wonder, what happens when the balance tips too far the other way? And more importantly, what if it's already too late to ask them to return? A strange signal appeared one morning, soft, quiet, and almost invisible. It drifted through space like a forgotten whisper, picked up only by an old listening station on the edge of the Aeroan belt. The station was small, run by a single operator, a Skari named Lel. She almost dismissed it, thinking it was just space, noise, but something about the rhythm caught her attention. It pulsed in a very human pattern, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Over and over again. It was Morse code, an ancient Earth signal. The message was simple, just one line: "We will not return, but you will remember." No source, no location, just the message. When the council received the recording, confusion turned into quiet panic. Many still believed humanity would return on their own. This signal, calm, steady, and final, shattered that hope. The humans were not coming back, and worse, they didn't seem to want to. The council held emergency meetings. They formed a secret team to investigate. No press, no public announcement. They couldn't afford fear to spread across the stars. Vaughn was chosen as part of the team. His knowledge of human behavior made him the best candidate. Alongside him was a crew of experts from different species: engineers, linguists, analysts. Their goal was clear: find Earth, or whatever was left of it. But the journey wasn't easy. The team quickly discovered that every known star chart showing Earth's location had been altered. Coordinates that once led to Sol now led to empty space or broken loops. Archives had missing pages. Records were corrupted in the same exact spot. The path to Earth. Someone or something had erased Earth's trail from the galaxy. But not everything was gone. Humans, as always, had left breadcrumbs. Hidden, buried, and coded, but still there. On a derelict satellite orbiting a forgotten moon, they found an encrypted log marked with Earth's original colonial seal. The message inside was clear: if you come looking for us, ask yourself why. The deeper they went, the more they realized this wasn't just a disappearance, it was a decision. The humans didn't just walk away. They closed every door behind them, carefully and completely. Still, the team pressed on. They followed clues hidden in old trade routes, ancient data archives, and abandoned human listening posts. At each stop, they found signs of human care: well-maintained systems, sealed buildings, gardens still growing. But no humans. It was as if Earth had vanished on purpose, but left just enough behind to be remembered. One day, they discovered something that changed everything. On a hollowed-out asteroid in the Orion Fringe, they found a museum. Yes, a museum filled with human artifacts. It had no staff, no power, just rows of preserved items, books, tools, music, and a single glowing terminal. Vaughn activated it. A voice spoke: calm, human, you were never enemies, but you never saw us. You used our hands, our minds, our hearts, but you never truly looked, and so we chose to leave. Not in anger, not in hate, but in silence. The stars are wide, and we seek our own path now. Farewell. The message ended with coordinates, but not to Earth, to somewhere else, far beyond the edge of known space. Vaughn looked at the map. The point was outside any known trade path, a region so dark and vast it was called the Deep Veil. No ships ventured there, no signals came from it. Until now, the team prepared their ship. Some hesitated. What if the humans didn't want to be found? What if this journey only made things worse? But Vaughn knew they had no choice. The galaxy was changing. Systems were failing. Trust was falling apart. And humanity, once dismissed and ignored, had become the missing piece holding everything together. They set course for the Veil as the stars shifted behind them. A quiet thought echoed in Vaughn's mind. Maybe humanity didn't just leave. Maybe they had moved forward and left the rest of the galaxy behind. And now, chasing their trail, the others were only beginning to understand what had been lost. It started with a vote. A small matter in the council: just a trade agreement between two mid-tier species. Normally, these kinds of discussions were handled in minutes. But this time, it dragged on. Not because the issue was complex, but because no one could agree. The mediator, once trained by human diplomats, was no longer available. Their replacement struggled to manage the tension. By the end of the day, the vote collapsed. Both sides left angry. No deal, no resolution. It was a small crack, but it was only the beginning. In the months that followed, more cracks began to form. Treaties unraveled. Long-standing trade routes turned cold. Disputes over shared territories flared up, not with battles, but with silence, refusal, and blame. The systems that once connected the galaxy began to feel thin, like threads stretched afar. Vaughn's team was still traveling through uncharted space, chasing the last trail humanity had left behind. But back in the core of the Union, something was shifting. Something the galaxy hadn't seen in decades. Unity was fading. Before Earth's departure, humans had played a strange role in galactic affairs. They were not the oldest species, nor the most advanced, but they were good at solving problems. Their minds thought in unexpected ways. Their ability to turn chaos into order, sometimes even by simply being present, had held many systems together. Now, without them, the threads were breaking. On the planet Shirin, a neutral zone between three powerful empires. Protests broke out, not against each other, but against their leaders. The people were tired. Things weren't working. Power grids once maintained by Earth's tech were unreliable. Medical supplies were running out. Education systems that depended on Earth's knowledge cores could no longer update their data. The protests became widespread confusion. Not war, not yet, just disorder, disconnection. The great galactic network, once fluid and balanced, had become shaky. Each species now looked inward, unsure who to trust. There were rumors, whispers that maybe the humans had known this would happen, that their exit wasn't just a silent goodbye, but a quiet test. How well can you hold your stars without us? Vaughn watched these reports from aboard his ship. They were approaching the edge of the Velar dark, silent region beyond any charted galaxy. Their ship's systems had started acting strange too. Human tech still worked best in the unknown, but even it was beginning to show signs of fatigue. The ship's communication system picked up another faint message, an echo, hidden inside an old Earth relay. We offered bridges. You burned them, so we stopped rebuilding. It wasn't angry, just tired, honest. The crew fell silent as they listened. Meanwhile, back in council space, some began asking the hard questions. Why did they never fully welcome Earth? Why did they mock human ideas, even as they built their future on them? Why did they allow pride to blind them? One council member, an elder from the respected Aerith caste, stood up in session and said something no one expected. We thought they needed us, but maybe we were the ones who needed them. His words did not start applause. They started silence, because now everyone could see it. Without humanity, systems were breaking down, not from attack, not from sabotage, but from simple absence. There was no one to fix the problems, no one to calm the storms, no one to bridge the growing gaps. It wasn't about power, it was about presence. Even the strongest voices in the galaxy had to admit it. The humans hadn't forced anything. They hadn't caused fear. They had just stepped away. And the galaxy, in their absence, was beginning to feel something it had never truly felt before. Regret. A council diplomat tried to send a message toward the last known Earth path. It was short, humble. If you hear us, we miss you. No reply came. Back aboard the deep space vessel, Vaughn stood at the viewing deck. The edge of the deep veil shimmered before him. No light, no signals, just quiet. We're here, the pilot said softly. Vaughn nodded. If humanity had moved beyond the known galaxy, if they had chosen silence over struggle, then what lay ahead was more than just space. It was the truth the galaxy had tried to ignore for too long. And now, every system, every world, every leader who once looked at Earth with doubt, was beginning to wish they had simply listened when they had the chance. Asterisk. ChatGPT said, the stars beyond the deep veil didn't shine the same way. They flickered slowly, like distant candles in a dark ocean. Vaughn and his crew had finally crossed into the uncharted void. No maps, no signals, just empty silence and cold space. Yet even here, there was a feeling they couldn't ignore. Something was waiting. Days passed in darkness. The crew grew quiet, watching their systems closely. Navigation was unstable. Most of their backup tech, built without human influence, struggled in this strange region. Only the Earth-made modules continued to function smoothly. It was becoming clear, even in the unknown, humanity's work remained steady. Then, a signal, not loud, not clear, just a pulse, slow and regular, like a heartbeat. It came from a moon orbiting a black, dying planet. The moon itself was hidden behind a thick shell of metallic clouds. No energy readings, no lights, just the pulse. Vaughn gave the order. The ship descended through the cloud layers, sensors barely holding up. As they neared the surface, something unexpected came into view. Structures, massive towers, clean geometry, silent buildings covered in soft blue lights. Everything was intact, but empty. The ship landed gently. No welcome, no warning, just the deep hum of silence. Vaughn and two others stepped out. They walked through what looked like a city, but not one designed for show. Everything here was functional, efficient, and elegant. Doors opened without sound. Lights flickered on as they passed. It was clear this was built by humans. But where were they? In the center of the city stood a dome. The doors opened on their own as the team approached. Inside, they found a massive hall filled with data crystals, archives, logs, and holograms. In the middle of the room, a console blinked softly. When Varun touched it, a projection appeared. A human figure stood before them. Not real, just a recording. The voice was calm, almost warm. If you have found this place, it means you followed the silence. It means you were willing to listen not just to us, but to yourselves. The crew said nothing. They only watched. For too long, we tried to be part of something that saw us as useful, but never as equals. We shared knowledge, repaired broken systems, protected those who needed help. But we were rarely asked what we needed, so we stopped asking. The voice paused. We didn't vanish. We grew. We moved forward, not to hide, but to build something of our own, far from politics, pride, and noise. The projection faded. Another one began, this time a map, showing a network of hidden human colonies spread across the dark regions of space. They weren't lost. They weren't hiding. They were thriving, quietly, independently. The crew stood in silence, realizing the truth. Humanity had never left in weakness. They had stepped away in strength. The archives held more data about energy systems that ran on unknown principles, communication arrays that spanned millions of kilometers without delay, healing pods that could regenerate tissue without machines. Earth had advanced far beyond the known galaxy's understanding, and they had done it quietly, without needing anyone's approval. Varn understood now. Humanity hadn't turned their backs out of anger. They had simply grown tired of being treated like tools. They had chosen peace, not the absence of conflict, but the freedom to walk their own path without waiting for permission. That as the crew prepared to leave, a final message played. We are not gone. We are simply elsewhere. We watch, we remember, and we hope, but we do not return to places where we are only needed, not wanted. Varn carried those words with him as they left the moon. Back in council space, things had worsened. Disputes were rising. Trade routes had collapsed. Some planets were without power. Others were slipping into isolation. The same leaders who once pushed Earth aside now sent messages into the dark, hoping for a reply. None came. But Varn had something better than a message. He had knowledge, proof, understanding. Humanity wasn't gone. They were alive, far ahead, and watching. And as the ship turned back toward the stars, Varn knew the most difficult part was yet to come. The galaxy had lost something it never truly appreciated, and now it had to face the truth. Humanity didn't need to come back. It was the galaxy that needed to move forward. If it ever hoped to stand beside them again. It began with a message, simple, short, and undeniable. It appeared across communication networks that had long gone quiet. From the core worlds to the far edges of the rim, every terminal, screen, and display lit up with the same words. You chose this. No signature, no voice, just 3 words, but everyone knew where it came from. In the great council chamber, once a place of noise and pride, no one spoke. The message echoed in silence. Leaders stared at the glowing words, unable to look away. There was no anger in the message, no judgment, just a fact. A mirror held up to the choices they made. Varn returned from the deep veil days later. He stepped off his ship with evidence maps, recordings, and proof that humanity was not only alive, but thriving beyond the edges of the known galaxy. They had not disappeared. They had evolved, quietly, patiently, on their own terms. And now, they were watching. The council demanded answers. They wanted to know where Earth was, how to reach them, how to speak to them again. But Varn shook his head. They don't want to be found, he said. Not unless they believe someone is truly listening. Across the galaxy, systems continued to break down. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly enough to feel it. The power grids, once supported by Earth's stabilizers, flickered. Transportation hubs powered by human engines began to shut down. Medical programs written by Earth-based developers stopped updating. Species that once stood tall now looked to the stars with uncertainty. On many worlds, people gathered around screens, reading those 3 words again and again. You chose this. Small groups began forming in secret. Scientists, engineers, thinkers trying to rebuild what humanity left behind. Some succeeded in restarting minor systems, but it wasn't the same. The technology had been more than wires and circuits. It had been guided by people who saw the galaxy differently. In schools, younglings asked their teachers why the humans had left. Some were told lies, others were told the truth, and the truth was simple. They were not welcomed. They were used, mocked, and overlooked until the day they quietly stepped away. And once they were gone, the galaxy realized how much they had mattered. Even now, the humans weren't seeking revenge. They weren't punishing anyone. They had just made a choice to stop fixing what refused to grow. A few worlds tried to send messages directly toward the deep veil. Most were ignored. But one message, humble, honest, sent from a small planet with no political power, received a response. It came as a whisper across the stars. Some of you are learning. Keep going. The response was short, but it lit hope in places where hope had gone cold. Varn shared his findings with smaller circles, educators, peacekeepers, builders. He didn't want governments to control the message. He wanted the people to hear it, to understand that humanity's departure wasn't the end. It was an invitation to grow up. Earth isn't gone, Varn told a group of young researchers. They're just ahead of us, and they won't come back to carry us. If we want to meet them again, we have to catch up. The stars seemed quieter now, not in fear but in thought. A slow shift began. On some planets, leaders stepped down, giving power to cooperative councils. On others, shared research programs restarted, focusing not on weapons or control, but on rebuilding systems, rethinking values. Across the galaxy, stories began spreading, not of fear, but of respect. Stories of human kindness, human creativity, human patience, things forgotten during their time in the Union, now remembered. And though Earth remained distant, a soft presence was felt in small ways. Lost ships found, guidance lights. Dying systems received anonymous code fixes. Beacons once thought silent began to hum again, faintly. It wasn't a return, it was a sign. Humanity was still watching, still listening, still waiting, not for apologies, not for power, but for growth. The galaxy had learned to live with their absence. Now it had to decide if it was ready to live differently, stronger, wiser, not because Earth returned to save them, but because they chose to rise. In the dark, 3 words remained on every screen. You chose this. And slowly, world by world, the galaxy began to choose something else, something better. Maybe, one day, they would hear a new message, one that simply said, "Now we walk together."